Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Tim Holtz, and today I'm going to talk about my Tattered Pinecone die with Sizzix alterations. This is a really unique die because it actually creates a dimensional mini pinecone from cutting out something that starts out flat. And what it will end up making is something like this. A cool little pinecone that can be used for a lot of different types of projects. So let me show you some of the things that we need to get started. First of all, we're going to work with cardstock. Now, I have tried this pinecone using grunge paper. I've also tried using glassine paper, and I found that cardstock by far works the best, whether it's printed cardstock or, of course, my craft core from Coordinations. I really like this stuff because you can grunge it up. So I'm going to take two of the colors that I want to work with. I've already kind of prepped that right from the pad. And let me talk real quick also about Coordinations in general. There's a lot of different types of cores with Coordinations. The craft core happens to be craft paper, so it's an actual craft core paper with a printed color, and you can distress it. You can distress it using sandpaper. So let me show you how to do that. When I'm sanding, because I do have a non-stick craft sheet down here, I always sand on something. This is just the back of a notebook, a piece of cardboard. Never sand on your craft sheet. But I will take a sanding grip, and I love my sanding grip for this because of its flat surface. So if you go in and just sand the craft core itself, I'll just kind of sand that just to show you. Of course, you're going to need some sort of cloth or something just to wipe off the dust. But you can see here how neat that is, the fact that it exposes the craft core on this. But there's also different ways that you can do this. So let me show you. We're going to start, of course, with the die. So let me get that ready. I'm going to take the Tattered Pinecone die. Now, it's really hard for the camera to pick it up. I'll try to tip it. But I can see the areas of what I'm going to cut out. One is going to cut out the pinecone. The other one's going to cut out this little piece of juniper. And maybe this will answer questions that I get a lot about when I'm designing a die. Why do I have things so far apart on there? Why don't I have everything close together because people are trying to save their grunge board or something like that? It's really because the dies are designed for cutting colored cardstock, and having that space allows you to use different colors of paper with one pass of your die cut. So I'm just going to kind of visually gauge it. I'm just going to place my paper over that, and just going in with my scissors, I'll kind of give that a little snip and say, all right, I need that. I'll snip that there. This is going to give me an idea of the size of paper that I need to cut out the pinecone itself. So I'm just going to go in and we'll cut this. Doesn't need to be that precise because remember, we're die cutting something out, so you don't need to be that precise when you're cutting if you're going to end up die cutting it anyway. And then for our little piece of juniper, I'll go with my next color, and I will take this and I'll mark there, and I will mark there. Excellent. And let's just go in and get this. Okay, so I've got those colors, got my green color, and I'm going to put this away for now, and I've got my brown color paper. So I'm going to work with the Vagabond. Let me get this thing set up here. It's all plugged in. We'll open this up. Now, because I'm working with a Bigz die, the nice thing about this, because the Bigz is a steel rule die, I could actually cut several of these at a time if I wanted to. So I could cut usually anywhere from 3 to 5 layers of cardstock with one pass on the die, but I'm just going to show you one. So I'm going to take this, I'll lay the brown down over the pinecone area, and now I'm going to lay that green down just over the juniper. And of course, my paper doesn't have to be perfectly straight. As long as you're covering up the die itself, it's good. We're going to sandwich this between two of the cutting pads, and remember, your cutting pads are going to get all cut up. I flip mine around. I use both sides. I kind of alternate using one on the top, one on the bottom, and flip it around. You could really get a lot of use before these need replaced. I basically replace them if they break or if they just stop cutting. So I'm going to make sure that my machine is engaged in the direction I'm going. Put everything in there. Hold this down. I love that sound. Excellent. We'll get everything out. Close this up. Get this out of the way. So I want to be a little careful when I'm taking this out of the cutting pads, and I'll share with you why that is. So I'm just going to remove that. I have my die cut pieces, and I'm going to go back to my piece of chipboard, and I'm just going to take these, and I want to flip it over. So I'm just going to lay this here, and I'll usually just flip everything over on the die and lift it up so everything's down there. And here's why. One of the things that I like is I actually like to sand my paper after I've die cut my design. So here I'm just going to get rid of some of that foam. So I'm going to go with my sanding grip. This is the pinecone part. And I'm just going to start sanding this, leaving that piece right inside the base that it was cut from. And the reason is, let me just wipe this up just so you can see. By doing that, it actually sands just around the edges of what I've cut. So it gives you the same effect as if you took this out and tried to sand all the way around the ends. But of course, with something detailed, you would need an emery board or something really delicate. Otherwise, you would completely destroy this cardstock, especially like on something like the juniper. So this is a really great trick whenever you want to do any type of sanding with your die cuts, is just leave it in the paper, then go ahead and sand it. Then we can go in and just pop this out. So this is my juniper piece that comes with the pinecone die. I really like this. You can use it for all types of things. Could actually probably be, I don't know, maybe a fern leaf or something as well. So I'm going to take that out. We'll set that aside. But this is the star of the show. We're going to talk about the pinecone. So we're going to pop this out. Now, what this really cuts out is a spiral. It's kind of a unique design. You may have seen flowers like this, but the tattered pinecone actually has little peaks and spikes all the way around the edge. So it really looks like a pinecone when you're done with it. So there's some prepping that we want to do before we start rolling this around. And that is to go into each of these little petals and kind of fold it over. So I'm taking that printed side and folding it around, just taking my finger and almost smashing it. But this is giving it just a subtle kind of curl around the edge. And I'm going to do that to each one of those. Because this is working with cardstock, I found it much easier to do this ahead of time before you start rolling. And it doesn't take long at all because you don't have to be perfect. You don't need a special quilling tool or a dowel or anything behind it. Just use your fingers and just go ahead and give it a pinch, because you'll see when we start to wrap this that even though we did this, it doesn't really stay for long. Then I'm going to go with my fingernail. I'm just going to quickly crease right in the middle of those petals. Basically putting my fingernail in there and just folding the paper. That's also going to help when we wrap this. And like I said, these little prep steps, they do not take much time at all. But it will save us time in the long run. Okay, so I've done that all the way around. There's our kind of our coil again. Now the trick to assembling this, one very important tool, that would be a toothpick. So you get a toothpick and our hot glue gun again. So I'm going to take this, and we're actually going to work from the outside in. That's the most important thing, is to remember work from the outside in. So I'm going to take my toothpick, I'm going to take some hot glue, and I'm actually going to put the hot glue on the end of the toothpick. And I'll show you why. Because I want to take this toothpick, and on that first little petal, I'm just going to take my toothpick and kind of roll it in its own little hot glue there. But then I can take this petal and really wrap it all the way around that toothpick without touching the hot glue, because it was on the pick. If you take that and you put it on the paper, you might glue layers together or anything like that. And this is what's going to hold the center of our pinecone together. So next what we're going to do is, once we have this wrapped, I've got my toothpick down. It doesn't matter which end of the toothpick if you have one of the flat ones, but I like to glue it onto the pointy side personally. I'm just going to start to wrap this. Now as you wrap it, you can go in with your fingers and you can fold down some of these petals, but really don't worry too much at first. Just go in, and that toothpick really helps you wrap this up. I think that makes a huge difference when I'm making these pine cones, is having that toothpick, because I've got something to hold on to. I don't have to worry about, like I said, a quilling tool or something like that, because I'm actually going to leave the toothpick in this pine cone. So I'm just going to roll it around, and you'll see as we do it, it's kind of moving its way down the toothpick. And I'm doing this pretty tight at first. I'm not really worrying, like I said, about spacing or anything like that. I just want to get that paper formed around the end. Now, when we get to the end, here's something that's really cool about this die. I actually designed the end of this die with a little hook in there. When you see the end of it, you're going to see that this cut kind of goes up at a little hook. And the reason I did that is because that will allow you to hook that last little piece right around the toothpick, and that's what will hold it there. That will keep it from just unraveling the whole time you use it. So once I've got that hooked on, now I can go in and really work with the pine cone. So I'm actually going to twist it the other way to loosen it up, and this is where everything starts to take shape. So you can make this a really tight little fine pine cone by just twirling that toothpick and making it smaller and really compress that, so you can make a little small one. Or you can loosen that up. You can extend this out if you want to have some of those longer pine cones, and as you do that, that's really going to allow you to go in each of those little paper petals, for lack of a better word, you can go in and just fold those out, and you can really open up that pine cone. Look at that, pretty cool. And once you are happy with the way this looks, you're just going to secure the base with glue. So what I do is I'll just kind of move this up a little bit. Again, I'm going to go in with the hot glue and just you just need a dot, you don't need much at all. Put that right there on the pick, kind of let this fall into it, and that's going to hold it in place. And you can just go in with your fingers, work right around there, and just like that, I mean, there's your pine cone. And you can do so many things to alter it. Of course, you can go in with distress ink, and we can take our blending tool, and now I can go in and just create some shadow. I can go underneath that if I want, and you still have that ability to just play around with it and shape it. If you were doing something for Christmas, you can put glitter or white acrylic paint to create the effect of snow on there. That's cool. But let me show you some other things that we can do with the pine cone. What about going from something like this, these are the small ones that we did, to something like this, a much bigger pine cone. Pretty simple. If you want to make a bigger pine cone for a different project, all you're going to need to do is you're going to cut this out twice and glue them together. You're like, glue them together. So I've still left my end that we start with, and I've done my spiral, but then I've connected my second one to the inside of the first one. You see that? I kind of took that, I cut my second one, and that first petal where we would have normally started, I've glued it to the inside of my first one. So you're kind of making this corkscrew, I guess, so to speak. So if you pulled it open, I'll see if that shows it very well, it kind of creates this little corkscrew thing. And you could continue to add these, and the more you add, obviously the bigger the pine cone you're going to make. So it's really nice if you want the ability to make a larger pine cone. But there are more things to make beyond the pine cone. What if you wanted to make something for, I don't know, a different season? How about roses, some flowers? My favorite thing about this die is the ability to use it year-round. So if I wasn't in the mood to make pine cones anymore, I can make what to me looks like dried roses. I know there's a lot of really rounded, puffy flowers out there when you're doing this spiral flower, but because this has all those little peaks, it does give it the look of these dried tea roses. I think they're really, really cool. And the trick to that, I'll show you this one because these two are already done, but this one, I've gone in, done the same kind of pine cone roll. So here's the yellow one, but I've made my pine cone. But the trick to making the roses, instead of having everything jet out, you just kind of take that, untwist a little bit so it loosens it up, push up from the bottom, and then tighten the inside, and you're kind of pulling that toothpick back down, so you're creating that innie or that inside of the flower, and you can push everything up. So you have the ability to create either the pine cone like this, or the dried flowers like this, using one single die like this, your tattered pinecone die. So hopefully these tips and tricks really help you out. These are a lot of fun to create, and I hope you enjoy making them.